Remember the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, members, staff, visitors, welcome to this last authority meeting of the year. We are quorate. This is good.
We're putting the flags out, Chairman.
Good. I have to read the statement. Welcome to this meeting of Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Authority. This meeting is being held at our Fire and Police headquarters in Eastleigh, where we are. The meeting is being recorded and broadcast on the authority's website and will be available for repeated viewing. The press and members of the public are also permitted to film and broadcast this meeting. Those remaining at the meeting are consenting to being filmed and recorded and to the possible use of those images and recordings for broadcasting purposes. There are no scheduled fire alarms. In the event of an alarm, out there, turn left into the car park, follow someone in uniform. Her. Yes. You know how the microphones work. Do please turn them off when you're not using them, otherwise they drain the strength from. Right. Agenda item 1, apologies for absence. Adam, may I introduce Adam Moray, who is the new dams officer taking over from the indoubtably good Katie. These are big shoes to fill. And Katie, thank you for all that you've done for us in the past. Okay.
So we just had apologies from Donna Jones, Police and Crime Commissioner, and also Councillor George Madgwick.
Thank you. Item 2, declaration of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest, members? No, okay. Item 3, minutes of the previous meeting. I'm not going to go through them page by page, but anybody got any issues on the minutes of the previous meeting? No? Good. Thank you. Shall I sign them afterwards? Deputations. There are no deputations for this meeting. So on to item 5, Chairman's announcements. I would like to welcome Councillor Louise Parker-Jones, for it is her, there, who is our newest member of the Fire Authority due to a redistribution of the proportionality. You are most welcome, Louise. And also to thank Councillor Stephen Parker for his work and commitment for what he did, and he became a casualty because of the new distribution. I'm not blaming you at all for anything. But Louise, welcome. Can we make sure, please, that Louise has the right badges and... Oh, she's got a badge. No, that's only a start.
That won't get you in.
That won't get you anywhere.
That's pretty.
Won't get you Before Thursday, please. Yeah, good. Right, a few more announcements from me. Some of us, and you will be able to tell us later, Councillor Harrison, sorry.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, Chairman. I wonder if we might just write a letter to Stephen Parker. I feel a little bit sad because his tenure here was quite short, but in that time he showed a lot of commitment to the authority, and I was on the fire leadership course with him up in near Coventry, Warwick. That's the place. I got to know him quite well over the 2 days we were there. He was really interested, very committed, and it's kind of sad that he's been, I won't say knocked off the authority, but his term with us has come to quite a short end. But I think if we did send him a letter thanking him for his contribution, that would be entirely appropriate.
A good point. Well done. I will, because I agree with everything you said. I mean, these things are regrettable. I have spoken, when I did this, I did speak with the leader of the council, and I mean, on the basis that God knows what's going to happen in May, if it is within our power, I have asked the leader to make sure that the first person to go back onto the authority is him, because I think he's done very good work. But these things happen, and it was purely last in, first out. But I will write to him. Yeah, good point. Some of us you can tell me later. Went to the emergency carol service, which was held in Winchester Cathedral on the 4th of December. This is the Blue Light Fraternity, to celebrate Christmas, and I thought it was a very enjoyable evening. It always is. I mean, Winchester Cathedral is a gem, and if you're watching that programme on PBS America on English cathedrals, there was a very good one the other night on Winchester Cathedral. Not a lot of people know that it sank. They had to send a diver down in the water to keep it floating. Interesting. Well, I thought it was interesting. Yes, sir.
On the carol service, I agree with you. It was exceptional, and I thought also the film which was shown was very good as well. And members who weren't there probably won't even know about that. There was a film shown. Yeah, the 12 Days of Christmas, and it's worth looking at. And what I thought came over to me was there's a lot of snapshots of fire rather than the police, and bearing in mind that the padre for organising that is a police padre, we got a good showing in that film. I imagine we've done it. I don't know.
Well, I hope so. Really good views of the control room, I thought.
Yeah,
excellent.
The whole thing, it was good for us. And I guess we want to bring it to other members' attention, because you can pick it up on YouTube, and maybe at some point, if we've got time today, it could be shown here.
Well, we'll get who wasn't there, who didn't go. Well, if we can get governance to crank it up and send it to Sally, Louise, and Karen, that would be excellent. Okay.
And George probably as well.
And George.
I don't think he was.
Sorry, I forgot George. And George. Okay. Right, I have mentioned it already, but there is a change of member support from Katie to Adam. And as I said, thanks to Katie. Excellent job. And Adam, you are terribly welcome. Right. There is a trainee firefighter's graduation on the 19th, which is next Thursday. Who's going to it? This Thursday.
Next Thursday is Boxing Day.
Well, the Thursday coming up is the next one. Semantics, Thursday the 19th. At least I'm going on Thursday the 19th. You can go when you want. There are 10 trainee firefighters graduating, 7 from us and 3 from Guernsey. We will be joined by the Deputy Lord Lieutenant, John Whittaker, and Tim Faller, who is the head of fire safety in Guernsey. My speech has been changed slightly, but do take the opportunity to talk to the really important people. I mean, the firefighters graduating are the really important people. The next really important people are the families and the friends and everything who come, because they really make that day. You know, you can feel the pride in there. So do take time to talk to them, because they're hugely appreciative if we do. So yeah, that takes here. There'll be drills, inspections, tea and medals afterwards. Okay, item 6, members' developments. I've got a few. On November the 8th, I laid a wreath on behalf of the fire service out there with a ceremony with the police and the ambulance. On November the 14th, I went with a chief fire officer to the chiefs and chairs meeting in Marble Arch, which was one of the better ones I've been to, actually. It was very good. The highlight of one of the talks was from Andy Rowe, who is the Chief Commissioner of the London Fire Brigade, who was brilliant. I mean, you know, the difficulties he has in resurrecting and turning the London Fire Brigade round are enormous. And I mean, he is an extraordinarily dedicated man, and I thought he was quite excellent. And on December the 12th, the other day, I went with others to the Basingstoke cadets passing out parade in Basingstoke Fire Station, which again, to see the ability and the keenness of these young people is really makes this job very worthwhile. And they were very good. Again, we had a deputy lieutenant giving out these certificates, which is good. We are well supported by the Lord Lieutenant's office in this thing, which is right and proper. So that was good. Members, anything else to add to members' development? Fran?
Yes, apart from the carol service on the 9th of December, I went to the Eastleigh and Winchester Cadets Pass Out Parade, and again it was really lovely to hear about the young people's journeys to their graduation, and it really does change their lives and set some of them up for life and a career in the fire service and other forces. So it was really lovely. Thank you very much.
I've got a few actually, and take the opportunity as well to thank some officers. But firstly, on the 7th of November, I attended a public meeting with Darren Paffy, the new Itchin MP, that he had arranged, and Carl Manners was there, and James Lucy. They were a great support, because I think I probably would have drowned with the information that people were asking in the public meeting. It was actually on Meridian News as well. These residents have got huge issues around the developers replacing the cladding on their building, which is dangerous, and just lots of fire issues inside the building. So yes, I know Carl is taking all that up, but yeah, it was a very interesting meeting, and I'm glad that I could attend. On the 4th of December, I know some of you went to the Winchester Carol service, but I went to the Gosport Fire Cadets Pass Out. It took quite a while to get down there because Saints were playing at home, so I had to try and get across the city, get down to Gosport. I can honestly say I've never been to Gosport before, so trying to find it in the dark, managed to find it, and my colleague Lee came along with me for company because I was getting concerned that I wouldn't be able to find it. And just on record, talking about the cladding, in my own ward, I've got, it's been in the Echo a couple of times as well, the prevention team, I'd just like to say, they're not talked about very, very much. It's all about fire stations, fire appliances. This has opened my eyes to a whole world of what the fire service does outside of the usual things that you expect a fire service to do. So yeah, the prevention and protection enforcement team have been a huge support to me. I've worked with Craig Hawkes and Carl Manners and James Lucy, again, all been great, a great help in making the building safe for residents. It's basically a converted office block, and it's been turned into 270 flats. And they're just, yeah, it's just not a suitable home. But yeah, that's all in the news at the moment. But I'd just like to, a big shout out to the prevention and protection team. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I met with Matt and Roger, so we looked at the draft performance plan on the 11th of November. I also attended the carol service in Winchester. I travelled from Gosport to Winchester, so we might have passed Sally. But welcome to Gosport. It's actually my ward where the fire station is, so welcome. And I just want to, again, pick up on the 12 Days of Christmas video. I think the carol service was fantastic, and it's a lovely environment to have it in. But the 12 Days of Christmas reminds us all that our fire personnel across all jobs are going to be working over this festive period. And we just need to be reminded of that. And similar to Sally, I just want to share some experiences because I think it's ideal to sort of share them and share that it isn't just about putting out fires. My mother-in-law, without prompt from me, had a safe and well visit and had fire alarms installed. And what is normally a harsh critic actually praised the fire service and the visit, which was lovely to hear. And that was not prompted by myself for arranging that visit. The other one is something we don't necessarily want to witness or come across, but I was a witness to a road traffic incident where a pedestrian got knocked over. And I just want to say that the fire service were the first responders, both from a medical perspective and from a road safety perspective. There also was an off-duty fire fighter there that also supported, and the response and I suppose the on-scene response was fantastic. And I did relay that back to Rob regarding my thanks as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Zoe. Two things while I think about it. It's interesting that, remember, the fire service is the only blue light fraternity which guarantees to turn up, which is worth remembering. Secondly, forgotten what I was going to say. You say first, and then I'll remember what.
I mean, during the last few weeks, I've been very busy with the fire service. Originally, I was going to go to Fareham for an impact course pass out, but that was the 6th of December. Unfortunately, it was cancelled, the actual pass out parade. I'm not really sure what happened, but it was all cancelled. I think there were some issues behind it, but I was going to go to that one. I also, on the 11th, went to the Fire Service Management Committee in London, and the agenda was the reform programme, which was a confidential item from the Home Office, finance spending review. Again, there were some papers on that, which I've sent on to Catherine, the slides, so which might help her in preparing all our budgets and what have you. Then there was a discussion on pensions, workforce update, and that was confidential, and the standards board and the building safety, and those were the main items. I think that although some of those documents were confidential, I think I can say I would be quite worried about looking forward to the budgets of what I think might be coming in the way of finance. And saying no more than that. The other one I attended was the next day, was the Saab pension meeting. And again, with the Saab, a lot of it is that technical issues about the pension, which I have to say are above my head. But the thing which worries me there, and was also related back to the Fire Service Management Committee, they approved an extra member of staff. And what worries me is that we pay over $12,000 a year as a fee to the LGA, and yet staff which they employ extra to work within pensions, and the work in the pensions needs to be done to make sure that everybody and the administrators know what's happening and the firefighters know about their pension. They charge us extra, and they're looking at, I think it was a 10% on top of what's already been agreed to charge the fire service. So I think that is quite concerning. It's a double whammy almost from the LGA, and I don't really agree with that. I oppose the increase in the one from the Saab to the fire service, but yeah, I was outvoted.
Roger, thank you for those observations. I have remembered what I was going to say. We're talking about Christmas. On Christmas Day, for the last several years, I've always visited the watch on duty at Basingstoke Fire Station. I take the view if they're working, why shouldn't I? If you do have a fire station within striking distance of you on Christmas Day, they don't half appreciate it, you know. If you just turn up and wish them a happy Christmas, take them a box of Quality Street or something, they like it. I mean, that's what we're here for. So I'll leave you with that thought. Derek.
That's a good idea, Chair. Get me away from 7 grandchildren at least. Yeah, just on the subject of the carol service, I did have the pleasure of sitting next to Roger with Zoe just in front of me. I can confirm that I wasn't the soprano in the act at the time, but it was a most enjoyable evening. It really was. It is, yes. It was very good, always is. Yeah, I did the Basingstoke Cadet graduation last week, which, although it's always the same thing, it still carries the emotions and everything else, and was quite pleasing with one special star performer in the act there. I've attended 3 actually, webinars and things recently, all over SIPFA and auditors' fees, things like that, with the PSAA and SIPFA, which is leading to some decisions. And of course, we had the the audit, as it's now called, not standards, no standards now. We had audit and governance meeting last week, which came up with some interesting material. And that's about it for me at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more? Karen.
Oh, sorry.
Try not to make me talk. So I've got two lots of thanks. So I had a massive fire in my ward last Sunday before last, sorry. So I wanted to thank we had 7 crews out. So I just wanted to thank every single one of those from the bottom of my heart. But also I had a message from a lady who she said she's got a very unhealthy worry about it takes over her life about fire, and she has somebody from the fire service. I'll give you the name outside of this meeting. Wouldn't like to embarrass them, but she said that they had been extremely good and understanding with her and put some things in for her, and she felt compelled to give her thanks to this person. So I'd like to do that. But also, what I'm asking all of my colleagues to do is to speak to your local MPs. I'm certainly speaking to mine, and I'll speak to Richard as well on the island, about asking for the fire authority to be statutory consultees to the planning, because of going back to the fire in my ward. It was in a house in an alleyway, and had to have the tower and stuff. So we've got lots of stuff going in our wards, haven't we, with buildings, especially not trying to do greenbelt, putting them into places that maybe are not so great for fire. So if we all speak to our MPs and do our best to about that, I'd really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
David.
So I'll turn Mike on this time. Just picking up on if I may, the statutory consultation. I wondered if we got the capacity to do that. That might be a question. If all of the planning applications flooded in here, would we be able to deal with that? But no, 3 items, Chairman. Firstly, Cosham. I know we were due to have our meeting there, or this one there, but obviously due to broadcasting made it difficult. But I did, as it's mentioned in the previous minutes, take the Chief Executive of the Air Ambulance along to have a look at the new facilities, because the Air Ambulance will be building new facilities very shortly, right next to the airport in Eastleigh. That is a useful network, I think, to set up good contacts. Second item, the emergency services service at Winchester. Yes, I thought the video was excellent, the 12 Days of Christmas. It did feature the Air Ambulance, talking of which the chairman of the Air Ambulance did do a reading with his Air Ambulance hat on. I was there with both hats on, so that was a great service to see. Finally, Basingstoke, the cadet passing out fire cadets. Now, Chairman, I'm sure we've all heard people say, "Oh, the youth of today," etc., etc. But I've never really subscribed to that. But I think we saw the very best of, as others have said, the very best of today's youth passing out at Basingstoke. They were inspirational, and 1 or 2 emotional as well, because they'd reached their 18th birthday and had to move on to do other things. But it was a thoroughly enjoyable event, and great to see those young people really stepping up and doing some great stuff. For those of you who haven't seen one, they use slightly smaller hoses and smaller equipment than the real stuff, as you'd expect, because they're dealing with younger people. But nevertheless, they were all very enthusiastic, very keen, and it was wonderful to see. That is all, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. I agree entirely. It's very good. Any more?
Can I come back to?
Yes, Shantha, please.
I just wanted to come back to Councillor Lucioni on what you were saying about members suggesting members might wish to have conversations with MPs, and perhaps pointing the Fire Authority back to the position statement, which is on our website, we can share around, which is around the authority's position statement on building regulations and planning, which sets out what you agree and your aspiration and ambition in that space, which may well help should you wish to have some of those conversations with MPs.
Thank you. Any more? Any more? I did forget to welcome to today's proceedings Lee Whitbread, who sits at the back, who is a councillor from Southampton. He's just come for lunch, really. Lee, you're very welcome. We like people to show an interest in our authority. Okay, thank you. Item 7, then, which is the proportionality and appointments. And I would ask Paul Hodgson if you would introduce this paper, please.
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning, members. This is a short paper as the additional agenda item in ModGov, item 7. And this follows on from the slight change in membership of the authority following a by-election in Hampshire County Council, which has resulted, as the Chairman said earlier, in Councillor Parker being replaced by Councillor Parker-Jones as one of Hampshire County Council's appointed members. That has had a knock-on minor change in the overall political proportionality of the authority. Appendix 1 to the paper sets out the new membership of the authority. And due to that slight change in political proportionality, there's a requirement now to review the allocation of seats to on committees. And the paper at paragraph 9 explains the principles that need to be followed in conducting that review. And then in Appendix 2, there is a suggested seat allocation for you to consider. So what we're asking is that you review that, consider whether you agree to that allocation, and then confirm the appointments of seats to the committees. And then finally, we've also included a updated version of the members' allowance scheme, totally unrelated to the proportionality issue. That's just a bit of housekeeping because the pay award has been agreed, so the members' allowance scheme has been updated in light of that in accordance with its terms, and so we've attached the updated version for you to note. So I think that's probably all I need to say, but happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Paul. Can I just check that you've got who's doing what on the Zoo now? Well, I will anyway. So what that means is that on audit and governance, we lose Zoe and Louise, you are on audit and governance. Okay. So audit and governance read Derek Mellor, Chairman, David Harrison, Vice Chairman, David Drew, Karen Lucioni, and Louise. Stakeholder Committee is Roger Price as Chairman, Fran Carpenter as Vice Chairman, Sally Goodfellow, Zoe Huggins, and there is a vacancy there which you are going to fill with who?
On the stakeholder.
Hmm.
We didn't discuss that last night. Yeah.
We'll do it if you want.
Well, can I come back on that one? I'll sort that one out in a minute.
Okay, all right. And the rest stay the same. Okay. Any questions, members, on the proportionality? Zoe?
Is there any change to the champion roles, Chairman?
Good point, there will be, but not huge. It's just what Stephen Parker was doing will go to Louise. If you're all happy with your champion roles, and actually I have to say we haven't had too much mention in these meetings of the champion roles. I think we might, for the next authority meeting, I think we might look at greater depth at the championship roles that you have.
It's the governance one Stephen was doing.
Yeah, governance then. You're on governance. I'll talk to you about it later.
Champion as well.
Champion.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You see that? There's an agreement.
Be quiet. Okay, any who else?
Well, just to make the observation that organisations like this, where our primary purpose is to put fires out, to train firefighters, to assist the fire service organising the way in which that's done, including the rescue services, there's not really an awful lot of space for party politics. And I'm delighted that most of the time, most of us get on well, and we focus on the jobs that we have to do. So hopefully these relatively small changes won't have a negative impact whatsoever on our primary purposes. That is all. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Good point. Any more? David Harrison?
Yeah, I think I would echo that across the floor. I think stability is much more important than political advantage, and I think our group believes that to be the case as well.
Thank you. Well, I did have a word with our monitoring officer, who has the view. Well, what is your view, Paul? You had the view that, as we are voted in for the term, that there was. Would you like to, from your own lips, please?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously members will recall you appoint a chairman and vice chairman for the entire municipal year, and that was done obviously in June for the appointments to last up to the following annual meeting. So I think it would need a good reason to change that, I think. So my view is it would be probably appropriate and preferable for things to remain on that front.
Thank you, Paul.
We just need confirmation of the personnel.
Roger.
Paragraph 5.
Sorting out at the moment. Can I just sort of stay later in the meeting at one place?
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah. We can move on. Can we move on?
Yeah, we'll need to just come back.
We'll come back to you, Roger. Okay, item 8, which is the Q2 budget update report on page 11 of your paperwork. And I would invite Catherine Edgecombe to introduce the paper, please.
Good morning, members. And so this is the budget update report for the Q2 position. So it covers two main topics, really. The in-year position for the current financial year, and then a forward look to budget setting in for the next financial year. Brief summary is that the in-year position for 24-25 is an underspend of around £600,000, which is broadly similar to the underspend of £800,000 that was forecast at the end of the first quarter of the year. The in-year position is largely a business as usual position. We've got significant underspends relating to on-call firefighters and to staff vacancies within the service, which is offset by some small underspends. But it is quite a business as usual position about which I don't really have any significant concerns. That's covered in paragraphs 10 and 11 in the report. So then paragraphs 12 to 13 talk a little bit about our efficiencies and savings plans. And they really refer on to Appendix C, which is a new appendix that we haven't necessarily had in the regular quarterly updates. And so what we're trying to do with this new appendix is to kind of set out our services approach to how we would deliver efficiency and savings, but also I think very much to catch us up on our progress to date, sort of tell the story of how we have made efficiencies and savings over the past few years. So I think otherwise our focus has always been very much in year. So it's trying to set out a broader picture of what we have done with our efficiencies and savings, trying to showcase some things that we think are examples of good practice, but also then showing what we've been able to do with that money that we have been able to use more efficiently to deliver other things.
So part of the reason for bringing this appendix now is that this will form the basis of our efficiency and productivity plan, which is a requirement for us to produce every February as part of the budget report. So this will be added to and will include any more detailed savings to be delivered in 25-26 as part of this efficiency and savings plan that will come more fully to the budget report. And the aim for that is to be presented as a more outward-facing document as well, so we can sort of showcase our efficiency and savings to other interested parties and to the public. So that's a new appendix. So there's also a brief update on the capital programme. So there aren't really many significant changes to the capital programme, although it's worth noting that we continue to make good progress in delivering the schemes in the programme. There will be, so there's the more detailed appendix is included as Appendix A1, and then there's the exempt Appendix A2, which has got a further confidential breakdown. For the February report as well, there'll be a more full review of the capital programme with the potential for the inclusion of any funding changes or new schemes that are required for next year. So then I think the sort of more, I was going to say more interesting, but I don't want to criticise the rest of my report. But the new part of the new information that's being brought forward in this report is about the 25-26 budget setting and the medium-term position. So I'm just sort of firstly going to remind members about where we are in the process of setting the budget. So in late November, we received the local government policy statement, which gave us some information about our budget for next year. But what we don't yet have is the more detailed local government financial settlement, which gives us even more detail about our funding. And then we get the final detail sort of in January. So we have made some progress in finding out what's going on. We're expecting the local government the overall policy funding settlement this week, hopefully before Parliament has its Christmas holidays. So, but unfortunately, there's still a lot of assumptions within this position. And just also as a reminder to members, we previously forecast a £6 million deficit for financial year 25-26. And that is actually still referred to in Appendix C because no decisions have been made that change that position. But what the paragraphs in this report do is to talk about some changes that the authority could make in February, which would which would result in a change to that forecast deficit. But it's just really wanted to stress that this is it's the table in paragraph 16 that covers decisions that could be taken. But these are decisions reserved for the authority in February. So the first part of the table covers off some pressures that have come up during the course of setting the budget. And these are they're contained within the table and referred to in the paragraphs below the table. So firstly, there's an increased cost of ill health and injury pensions. These ill health and injury pension budget has remained static for some time, so it's sort of time for us to increase that budget to match more in line with the actual current and forecast costs of these pensions. There's also a proposed increase to our Network Fire Services Partnership budget. So this is a partnership between our fire and rescue service and 3 other fire and rescue services, primarily focused on the delivery of our fire control. So it provides it is important in that it supports collaboration between services and, very importantly, provides resilience for our control function. So as noted in, I think if you remember from previous finance reports, we have had some shortfalls on that budget. So we've done a more thorough piece of work to review the future requirements, but also to tighten up some of the financial governance so we don't end up in situations where budgets diverge between the services. But there is a proposed increase to that budget for next year. The next pressure is a change to our occupational health and wellbeing services. So there's been a change to these services, and they were shared between three Hampshire partners, and Constabulary has withdrawn from the shared services. So there's been a re-evaluation of the cost for the existing partners. So currently we are continuing with the current occupational health and wellbeing service. There is a slightly increased cost, but there is also work going on to see if that cost can be further managed to deliver the service more efficiently. But there is a pressure identified there. And then the final pressure is an increased inflation contingency, and this is largely because we currently have no information at all about pay awards for any staff groups for next year. So it seems prudent to include some kind of inflation contingency on the basis that we haven't got any indicative figures at all. So, and then those changes are offset by a generic assumption we hold about £300,000 worth of pressures. So there's some new net pressures identified. So then the next two topics are about our funding assumptions. So one of them is reasonably good news about the impact of a second and empty homes premium that's been introduced by a number of districts, most significantly being the Isle of Wight Council, Unitary Authority and New Forest District Council, where there are more second homes than in other areas. So that has increased our council tax base because there is a premium on those homes. So that is hopefully forecast to be an additional £500,000 of income for the Fire Authority, which is good news. And then the additional 2.4 million is the forecast impact of a £5 council tax increase, which would be a council tax increase at the referendum limit, but is obviously a decision for the authority in February to make. So as we are relatively low council tax, our council tax level for a Bandy property is relatively low. A £5 increase is a 6.04% increase. And so these figures assume that that increase is made. It's worth noting as well that I think part of the reason for this increase is that there's been lobbying from the fire sector, including from our authority, about the difficult financial position that fire authorities found themselves in. So it's pleasing that that has had this effect of some recognition of the lots of the financial challenges we're facing. So pleasingly also, the report identifies just under £500,000 worth of initial savings that have been identified during the budget setting process. So the main reasons for these are there are some savings that have resulted from some of the authority's investment in carbon reduction. So, for example, we've seen savings on our fuel costs and on some heating costs where more efficient technologies have been put into place. So it's really pleasing to see those savings start to come out. And there's also been some really good work on procurement savings, particularly on ICT contracts. So those are our initial savings, but as part of the February 2025 budget reports, we'll be bringing forward further savings for approval from the authority, which will be built into the budget and should go some way to close the budget gap. And the only other thing that's worth flagging about this is since the last time I updated the authority, there's been an increase in employers' national insurance contributions announced, and so and a reduction in thresholds. And so currently, based on information from government, my assumption is that our higher costs will be offset by a grant. That is something that we need to see when the figures come through, because for fire authorities, the threshold reduction is particularly significant, given the number of our workers who are on-call firefighters who are relatively low paid. So this threshold reduction has a significant impact, and we're yet to see how the allocation will be dealt out among all the affected public sector bodies. So that does remain a risk that our allocation of grant funding will be lower than the impact of the national insurance rise. So that is something that we won't know about until hopefully this week when we get the announcement of the settlement. So then the rest of the report sort of covers some further business as usual items on our reserves and on our prudential indicators and on treasury management. So I'm very happy to take any questions about those in particular. It's also just worth flagging the table in paragraph 26 shows our ongoing reduction in reserve balances. It's just worth reminding members that this was a planned reduction in that we did have high reserves as a result of delays to the capital programme. So we are now using those reserves to deliver the capital programme. But this isn't a case of money running out, in that we do replenish these reserves to the tune of over £6 million every year. So this isn't a sort of the reserves running out entirely. We are putting new money into the reserves. So, the rest of it is just required information about our prudential indicators and treasury management strategy, and also a brief update on the statement of accounts. But I'm not proposing to go through those in detail, so I'm very happy to take any questions about those.
Catherine, thank you. That's very clear and well put over. Members? David?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Catherine, for that comprehensive and detailed report. And if you say it's okay, then I'm always confident that it's okay. But a couple of questions. The first one, which you may not know the answer to, which is you mentioned second homes, and that there are some districts who are putting up the council tax on second homes. I just wondered, from a fire perspective, are they more likely to catch fire or less likely than any other homes? Do we have the statistics? I just thought maybe that would be an interesting bit of info. The second one was, you spoke about national insurance, which I was expecting you to mention, but I just wondered if you could give us an amount. What is the extra that we will have to contribute, and hopefully we'll get a grant for that. Thank you.
So in terms of the first question, I definitely don't know the answer to the likelihood of catching fire, but I do think there isn't necessarily sort of a principle within the precept for fire that those who are more likely to receive service from the fire and rescue service pay a higher amount, if you see what I mean. But yeah, I might have to leave that to somebody else if that's okay. Though we have done some initial work that suggests it's about £1.4 million increase for national insurance. And so that's probably 2/3 threshold increase and 1/3 just the actual rise. So I think that's the threshold increase that's concerning, because that is quite an unusual position, because most authorities don't have the significant number of people who earn a very low annual salary. So that's what's concerning.
Thank you, David. On the question was, are second homes more or less likely to catch fire? Shantha?
What a great question. We don't have, so I can't give you a specific answer, but I think I can try and offer us up something that is quite helpful. So we know that fires can be started by a variety of factors, such as certain types of behaviours. So therefore, if the building is empty, there's an absence of those behaviours. But equally, sometimes fires can also be started deliberately, although, as you know, we have a good track record in terms of the prevention work and tackling and addressing that. And I guess then the last aspect of that is, what does that property hold in terms of the increased prevalence of lithium-ion batteries, EVs, etc. So I think that, that's something we can go away and look at to give you a more rounded and satisfactory answer, but we don't actually have the specific data on that at the moment.
No, thank you. I do wonder if we have sufficient statistics on what causes fires and breaking down into various. I mean, I'm sure we do, but is it sufficiently comprehensive for our purposes of knowing where there's a greater risk? That may be a piece of work that may need to be done, or may not. Just an observation, that one, Jim.
Thank you. Derek, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Catherine. Very good. Again, it's for the third year on the trot. We're saved on terms of budget monitoring situation by on-call firefighters. We just haven't been able to recruit, I presume. I did hear from an officer the other day, met at Basingstoke, that performance is changing the attack to try and get more on-call firefighters with a different methodology. But 740,000 quid is quite a heavy sum. That saved us from being in debt or being a deficit at the end of this current year. I share Roger's concern into the news we pick up at things, the webinars I've been on. The government seems to be talking in very low terms of expected settlements we can see in the form of grants. They're talking 2%, and 2.8% was a figure bandied about the other day. That's not good news for us at all, especially as we're still for 25-26. Catherine, are we prepared to put in a budget 3.39 million short? Catherine.
So we can't set a deficit budget because that's not legal, but I am hopeful that when we see more details of the settlement and we are able to finalise some of our savings figures, that gap will be smaller. So then what we would do is we would, the first call on closing that gap would be our budget equalisation reserve. So that is a reserve we hold for that purpose. We would then look to other reserves as a last resort, we would reduce our annual contribution to reserves to bridge that gap. So we aren't in a position of not being able to bridge the gap, but obviously then any reserve funding we put into closing the budget gap is money we can't spend on investing in our estate and assets. So it is always a difficult decision, but I'm not concerned that we'd be in a position of not being able to close, not being able to set a balanced budget.
And estates is primarily the capital expenditure.
Mm-hmm.
So we do have a problem there, really.
So if we aren't able to close our budget, we would need to look at the things we would need to reduce to close the budget. I think it's I do think we've got savings that will bridge that gap, and hopefully this week we'll know a bit more about the settlement. So I think it's just slightly too early to say. But if we were then to have a gap that we couldn't close through using designated reserves, we would then need to look at all of our other asset or all of our other reserve balances and decide what action we could take, which might include some scaling back of other priorities. But those are all things that have been approved by the authority and are essential for sort of firefighter safety and service delivery. So there's nothing we've got which is kind of an easy option that we could stop doing.
Did you consider the preset council tax for next year, aiming for a supplement?
So the referendum limit for fire authorities is a £5 increase, which is what we haven't considered is any kind of referendum. I don't think the fire authority is in that financial position, but there is always going to, if we ever were to consider that, the challenge for us is that I think the latest estimated costs of a referendum are around £2 million. So that would mean that given the relatively low level of our precept, it would be an incredible risk for us to take. And so, but I don't think we're in the financial position where we would be looking at either exceptional financial support or an above referendum increase. I don't think we would be looking at that at the current time.
And my final question, we've got the figures all here. What about the establishment figure? Are we working on the same establishment figures?
So part of our looking at our savings programme, and then there's in the efficiency appendix, it details what we're looking at. We are also looking at our firefighter and support staff establishment. So some of the savings may result in establishment changes, but those would be brought forward to the authority, including appropriate staff consultation and consultation with unions, etc. So there are no current plans to change the establishment, but plans with such a large proportion of our spend being related to staff, it's difficult for us to see how we could make significant savings without affecting that at all. But there aren't any sort of current plans to do that have been brought to the authority.
And final question then on audit, the audit fees, I know you've stashed these away from 22-23. What are you expecting in terms of a rebate on those fees?
So the audit fee is arranged for us by the public sector audit appointments and EY. They work and the firms. So we haven't yet had that information back. So I haven't really got an expectation of that yet about how much that would be.
To individual authorities. That was what I heard in the webinar. But we'll see. Okay. Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Roger.
Thank you. Derek raised the point about the on-call underspend of 740,000. 740 million. Thousand. Right. Just looking at all the noughts there. But what is quite interesting, when you look at the report on the outcomes, is that the on-call were available 2.4% more in this time than before. But it's a small percentage, but it's quite interesting because in some ways it reflects against the actual saving. But the other thing which also is going to save money on call is the number of call-outs they get. If their call-outs go down, then the amount they get paid is going to go down. So it's not just the numbers, it's a balance between the two. The other question I was going to ask of Catherine is that appendix, which one is it? The one with the appendix A1, is that shows the capital expenditures, and it shows Basingstoke. That's been there for a long, long time, and we know why. Why, and then the other estate programme is shown in there as a bulk figure. But you go to another paper, it then lists out all of the estate programmes. And I wonder why places like Cosham, which has been finished, has to be in the other paper and can't be in the open paper, if I put it that way. It would seem to me that where things are finished and contracts are signed, it's not going to be affected. I would have thought it should be in the open paper rather than a different one. Because I can understand when we're looking at doing a contract, you don't want to disclose your hand of what you budgeted for. And I totally agree with that. But where they've already been contracted, agreed, why are they not in the other one? What's the rationale behind it?
I'm passing this to Matt.
Yes, so the reason certain stations and projects are in the confidential is purely that although the final accounts might have been agreed with the contractor, we still hold an element of retention. So those projects are still in snags. So they're still in undergoing snags, which means there's still negotiation happening with the contractor on how much we'll pay for and how much they'll pay for. So it's the budgeted amount that you're seeing in the confidential appendix, which, again, for the same reasons as when we don't like to have those figures in the public domain when the contract's being built. We don't want them to know, obviously, how much money we have available for the negotiation of the snags. Once the snags are confirmed, then they'll drop off or be reported in the public report. Basingstoke's slightly different because the figures are known because that project's so far down the track and is a slightly different position on Basingstoke currently. But the other ones are in a different commercial position. Hopefully that answers your question.
It does partly, but Basingstoke was also a snagging problem, which has gone back over a number of years. So I don't see why, I hear what you're saying, but I don't see why that stands out differently under a snagging, other than you've agreed the amount.
Yeah, other than the contractor's aware of how much is there. It's a different contractor. There's a different, it's several years since that project was finished. So we've had different open conversations with the contractor around how much funding is available for the snags left on that scheme, which is different to the other projects, which are not in that position. So Basingstoke is an anomaly because we've been more open book because we've tried to resolve that problem in a slightly different way with the contractor.
David.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, the government's decision to raise additional tax through the increase in national insurance contributions, I think has probably had a lot of unintended consequences. I think we all know that there are organisations, including hospices, which are affected by this. And I don't think even a Labour government really intended to penalise some of the organisations that are now being penalised. But I'm reminded that the first duty of government is to keep us all safe. And one of the ways that you do that is resourcing organisations like ours properly. Now, I'm aware that there have been some special pleadings made in respect of organisations that range from the NHS, organisations that are heavily reliant on staffing. And we are one of those, certainly. But I think that we have a sort of a special pleading to make on the basis that we're not just hit by the increase in national insurance contributions, but in the threshold in which it kicks in. And I just wonder, in our discussions with government, whether we've really made that point to them, because I don't want to see us under-resourced. I want the penalty that's been imposed upon us to be rectified, And if you think about it, it's a kind of a circular thing. The government is getting more revenue as a result of national insurance contributions, and I think that that should come back to organisations like ours.
No, that's a good point, David. Let me just go through the letters that we have written to government, just to check on that issue. And if I feel and you feel that we haven't done it strongly enough, we'll fire off some more.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah.
Can I just say, as I understand it, although it's very difficult for them to calculate it, the government is going to repay to us the cost of national insurance. That we hope is going to be in the precept when it comes out. So it should be. Catherine said it's 1.4 million is their estimated figure at the moment. I would hope there will be that sort of figure coming as an extra grant to us. And now the worry is what happens in future years. This is always the problem.
Well, they said that. I mean, they said they would repay it, but they haven't said how much or when. So it's a question.
But the problem is, if you say you're going to give a grant to do something, it's very difficult at the moment for the government to distinguish exactly what that figure is. And I believe that Catherine probably has been in touch through the system with them, advising what sort of figure it is, because that's what we've got to get back. And I think from all the meetings I've been to, that is the intention, to pay the full cost of that to the fire authority or fire service.
Catherine, do you have an inkling?
Yeah, that is the case. So I think all public sector bodies have been told that we will receive a grant to cover the full cost of the increase. It's just that it's one of these examples where the devil's in the detail about exactly how that gets allocated out between authorities. So that's where the risk is.
Zoe.
Thank you, Chairman. Just going back on quarter two, so page 13, and maybe following on from the discussions. I'm just looking across A, B and C that are obviously all staffing, and predominantly they say largely due to vacancy challenges or staff sickness. When you look across those, it's about a 1.5 million underspend across staffing. And I suppose maybe my question is to Molly, is looking at that, I suppose, what is the risk associated to it when we look at the quality of service, or maybe the continuity or the efficiencies? And I appreciate that's from whole time on call and non-operational, but that's quite a striking underspend across all of those, when in particular Roger, you looked at the performance report on-call firefighters was up. Our staff sickness is down 1.2%. So I just wonder where we are with that. And then linking into the national insurance conversation of when we look at other employee costs, which is overspend relates to higher costs for external suppliers covering for work vacancies across any of those roles. The likelihood is they're not getting a national insurance grant. So do we need to forecast looking at them putting up their prices, and then how do we manage that overspend across quarter three and quarter four? And then I just have one more brief question about transport, but I don't know if you want to come back on the staffing ones first.
Thank you. So I think the first question, sorry, you might have to help me, was around whether that impacts on our service to the community having the underspend. And I think, as Roger's already pointed out, we've seen in the performance that availability has increased. As part of some of the work that we're doing around savings, we're looking at our organisation design and trying to address where we've got critical areas of need and which roles are fundamental to us continuing to deliver an effective service to the community. And that will then contribute to how we help shape and design the organisation moving forward, so that we can be sure that we are delivering the critical services that we need to and keeping critical roles within the organisation and looking where there's opportunity for us to create efficiencies elsewhere. So that our main focus through all of our work is continuing to ensure that we provide the service we need to our communities. I think the other question Catherine was going to take. Yeah.
So I think this question about the NI impact on our suppliers is one that's been raised by a lot of public sector organisations, in effect, that if we're getting a grant to pay for the impact on our own staff. For example, in the Fire and Rescue Authority, we've got services provided by Hampshire County Council where we won't be receiving necessarily a grant for the rise in those costs, and equally anything we do commission from suppliers. So that's part of the rationale for including a slightly higher inflation contingency for next year. I think it's likely that some of these changes we won't see the full effect of in this year, quite often because we will be in already fixed price contracts with people that are reviewed annually. But that is part of that rationale because we're not sure about the impact on wider suppliers and price raising, and equally then it's not always clear that an increase of a certain amount that a supplier faces is passed on exactly only to that level to us. So I think that is definitely a risk for next year.
Thank you. And just a very brief question on F, so transport costs. 117,000 pressures relating to travel between mainland and the Isle of Wight. Is that all predominantly looking at maintenance and vehicle repairs, or is it the cost of more frequent travel to the Isle of Wight? How is that broken down? And are we planning, I suppose, that overspend as we go across Q3 and Q4 to increase?
So I'll take that one. So I don't have the breakdown of the 117 between the travel and the repairs. They've both been lumped together. But so part of it is an increase in cost over the budget setting for the travel across the water for BAU sort of business travel. And then the other element is the cost of maintaining predominantly the heavy fleet. So that's sort of a hangover, if you like, from the delay to our vehicle replacement program. So our fire appliances are older, and the parts of those are now more costly, and they're Euro 5 engines. So as we start to replace those vehicles with the new capital programme, those costs should come back down.
Derek, again.
Again? Apologies. Okay. Just two very quick ones. The 8.95, was it 8.95% increase on employer pension contributions that came about in April last year, Roger? Is that, as I understood it, the government was going to foot the bill on that because it not been pre-budgeted, but only for this year. Has that been taken care of in the both the forecast for next year and the current operating expenses, Catherine?
So that my current understanding is that grant is likely to continue, and that has been included within for next year.
Very good.
But we haven't had confirmation of that because we're waiting for that in the full settlement. So there is still a feeling that we have possibly been slightly underfunded for that grant, and we continue to talk to the Home Office about that. But it is, again, one that's very difficult to precisely identify because all of these numbers change at all times. But that is one that we're expecting to be funded. If that weren't to be funded, that would be a really significant issue for the fire and rescue sector, not just for us. And I think that would really be a very significant cut.
For the whole public sector.
For the fire sector. So, but we'll know more about that hopefully this week.
Okay. Second question, it's probably a little advanced, but the excellent Grenfell paper on Grenfell here. Lots of recommendations made. We recommend that these people pay, those people pay, or whatever. Are we committing any finance at all to second tranche of Grenfell? Will it incur any additional expenses? Are they budgeted for? Sorry.
So we have received in the past additional specific grants for dealing with specific recommendations, which are very sort of tightly controlled, so that there'll be in order to assess this grant, you'd need to carry out these activities. Okay. So I think the assumption is that some of that grant funding would continue to do that. If not, we would need to reprioritise our own workload to deal with all of those high priority activities.
And final point, if I may. The Isle of Wight situation you just raised about transport costs. If we go ahead with the capital programme, Matt, on the Isle of Wight, which you knew my views on that, if we go ahead with that, surely we're putting additional vehicles basing them over there with the new facility at the East Cowes, wouldn't it? So we'd reduce the transport costs.
Yeah, so I guess the facility at East Cowes will be replacing an existing one at Newport. So it'll just be relocating the fleet workshop from Newport to East Cowes, and then obviously the on-call at East Cowes are already there. So I don't think there's an anticipation that there's any further, but arguably having that facility does mean we don't need to bring vehicles across to the mainland for maintenance, which does obviously help marginally on the travel cost.
Good. Thanks for your time. Thank you. Very good.
Microphone, Derek, please. David.
Thank you. Just a very quick one on transport costs. Slightly tongue-in-cheek, but have we thought of buying a boat? In terms, and I appreciate we couldn't. I appreciate that we couldn't carry one of our vehicles on it, but is that completely? Is that a completely potty idea? One of my another completely potty ideas.
Dismiss as potty idea.
It's something we've looked at in the past, very briefly, but we have an excellent, obviously, service for getting our vehicles and our people across, and we incorporate that into all our planning.
Just the point is that we do need to keep asking these questions, or not excessively, but it's important to just reaffirm that actually we've thought about it, which you've said, and that it's not something that we should be doing. So thank you.
No, I've got one now. Any more members? Okay, if I can refer you to
Councillor Lencioni.
Councillor Lencioni.
Save the best for last, that's what I say. Lots of great work here, Catherine. Lots of great questions as well from my colleague. Is there anything that we've not seen that you're particularly worried about?
So at the moment, no. I think probably the only thing that hasn't really come out fully in this report is the fact that we know that we've got further pressures on our capital programme. So I think that whatever, there's setting a balanced budget for next year, and then there's the medium-term look around how do we do all the necessary capital works to keep our estate healthy and inclusive. And I think that's probably the bit that we haven't really got to yet, on the basis that we always end up, we don't get the information for next year till so late. It is quite difficult to maintain that forward look, but that will form part of the medium-term financial plan that comes to the Fire Authority in February, because we shouldn't lose sight of the medium term, because we're focused on sort of getting through each year.
Roger.
I think that it just shows what's been questioned is how difficult it is for Catherine and whoever was doing that job and the finance people of putting the finances together, because the announcements is round about Christmas every year of what the government is going to give us, and whereas they've put costs up in certain areas, like the pension fund, which Derek has mentioned. The pension fund, firefighters' pension fund, is not a pension fund which we have built up in Maid. It's a government pension fund. We pay it to pensioners. We collect the money from employees and pay it all to the government, and we get the money back from government of what we paid out. But we're so much in the hands, when you're talking about contributions, of the government, of getting the money back. And if they ever reneged, no matter what colour the government is, on paying back, we would be in stuck, quite honestly. And that's what's so difficult, I think, for finance, to be able to be guaranteed what they say this year, maybe not what is paid next year. And that's the problem. And these are ongoing costs. It should be said that they are committing to pay the full costs of the pension fund, in my opinion, whatever.
Noted. Any more? Catherine, thank you. A very good report, very well put together. You clearly got a phenomenal grip on this. And I share my view with Councillor Drew that if you're happy, then so am I, in very difficult circumstances. May I draw you to the recommendations on page 11 of your paperwork, which are that the forecast outturn position for the financial year 24-25 be noted by the full authority, that the updated capital programme forecast, appendices 1A and 2, be approved by the full authority, that the quarterly Treasury Management Update report, including the Treasury Management Indicators, Appendix B, be noted by the full authority. Noted? Oh, sorry. Turning the page. That the quarterly prudential indicators, paragraph 27, be noted by the full authority, and that the efficiency and productivity appendix C be noted by the full authority. Noted. So noted. Noted. Good, thank you. Let us move on then to item 9, which is the authority policies for financial management, asset management, environment, people and organisational development, to be found on page 43 of your paperwork. Matt, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, members. So this report seeks your approval for 4 policies for inclusion within the authority's new policy framework. This action was set by you last year as part of our 5th year of the safety plan for us to look at the authority policies and establish a framework which, in effect, is a bit of a housekeeping, but pulls together various position statements and policies and principles into one place. So in front of you today are 4, the financial management policy, the asset management, the environmental, and the people and organisational development. You also have a position statement as part of the asset management policy, which sets out the 5 estate design principles that is the sort of ambition of our estate for the future. So if I just draw attention to the appendices, just really briefly, so the financial management one clearly sets out the commitment to effective and efficient financial management and the use of our funding. The policy is based on principles that were already agreed by the Fire Authority on the 27th of February of this year, and one of the background papers provides that for you. So those principles have just been incorporated into this template and into this new policy. Appendix B is the asset management policy, and again this shows how the authority and therefore the service will manage its physical assets. So things like land, buildings, machinery, vehicles, workwear, equipment, all of those kind of infrastructure and physical assets. So this again built on a policy the authority approved back in the summer of 2022. So taking that policy, we have just in effect transposed that into this new template again, so it matches the suite. And attached to this policy is the position statement for the estate design. So these are the 5 estate design principles which the authority approved, I think, back in 2018, and they are still the bedrock of our estate strategy and how we manage our buildings. And you'll see some of them come to life in places like Cosham and Bishop's Waltham and other places. Appendix C then is the environmental policy. So this one, again, this outlines not only the statutory element of our journey to net zero, but also other performance mechanisms around how we'll seek to minimise our impacts of our activities on the environment. And this builds on a report taken to the authority in December 2022, where the authority approved adopting the National Fire Chiefs Council Sustainability Charter. And that charter has been signed by the chairman and by the chief fire officer. So the policy is in effect transposing and taking the key things from that charter, again, onto the new template. So a bit of housekeeping on all of these kind of policies, if you like. And then finally, Appendix D is the people and organisational development policy, and this sets out our commitment to develop and maintain a workforce that is professional, skilled, diverse and responsive to our operational requirements to serve our communities. So this went in September 2020 to what was at the time the Shadow Authority, and that authority approved a people and organisational development policy. So this is in effect again transposing those and updating those policies into the current Appendix D. So that in effect is a broad summary. Happy obviously to take questions from members.
Thank you, Matt. David Harrison.
Thank you, Chairman. As one of the members that's been party to the emergence of these policies, I dare not challenge or suggest any changes at this very late stage. I'm not that brave, Chairman. My only question is, will this be available, or will all of these policies be available on the website?
Yes, yep, we can make them available on the website, yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Fran?
I was reading in the canteen this morning the the charter, Dine to Work charter, which I noticed, and I just think that's just a wonderful thing. Is it already adopted and it's in place, really? That's what I wanted to know.
Yes, so we've adopted that, and that's obviously in place, and you'll see it outside there. I can't remember which fire authority that was approved at, but it had previously come to the fire authority.
Louise.
Thank you very much. I'm really pleased to see that there's an environmental policy that's been contained within this suite of policies, and obviously the devil is always in the detail, and the ongoing monitoring so that we can ensure that we meet that. I noticed we mentioned champion roles earlier, and this is just my naivety because I am so new. Is there an environmental champion that on this authority? You're the champion,
No.
Oh. Oh.
Yeah, who is?
I think it's George Madrick. I think it's Councillor Madrick is on the environment.
George is the champion. Because I think it would be really good if our champions were able to feed back on the policies that relate to their areas. Actually, it's something that I feel would be really helpful.
You would be a very
champion.
She would. No, she would. Louise, you just talk yourself.
Well, so I just feel that this gives us a good framework from which to start, and to, to ensure that we help to move the fire service forward with our aspirations. Sorry, thank you.
Welcome aboard. Roger.
Very quick question. Is that all the documents are on a deep dark blue colour, except for the estate, and it's on more of a greeny colour? Are there different colours for different position statements? And it gets stuck out. This one did here.
Yep, so the dark blue ones are the policies. So that's got policy in the top right, and then the green one is a position statement. So it's part of the policy. So I appreciate as you see them here, they're a long list. Yeah. When you see them in sort of real life, if you like, in terms of on the document, the two will be linked. So it is part of how we deliver that asset management policy. So it's a different colour.
I didn't pick up that change of word.
It's all a bit technical, Roger. Anybody else? Members? If we can keep this together. Anything else? Matt, thank you. Thank you. If I can draw your attention to page 44, to the recommendations, which, Christ, there's a lot, which are that the Financial Management Policy Appendix A be approved by the full authority for inclusion in the authority's policy framework, that the Asset Management Policy Appendix B be approved by the full authority for inclusion in the authority's policy framework, that the Environmental Policy Appendix C be approved by the full authority for inclusion in the authority's policy framework, that the People and Organisational Development Policy Appendix D be approved by the full authority for inclusion into the authority's policy framework, and that the position statement of estate design, Appendix B1, which forms part of the asset management policy, be approved by the full authority for inclusion as part of the authority's policy framework. Agreed? Thank you. Okay, moving to item 10 on the agenda, which is on page 65. Mid-year, 24-25 mid-year performance update report, which again is Matt, please.
Thank you. So yes, most members will be familiar with the format of this report, but this is our mid-year update on our annual performance report, and it's split into two sections. The first looking at the 6 safety plan activities that the authority tasked the service to achieve over this financial year, and the second giving an update on progress against key performance indicators aligned to our priorities. If I just start, as interesting, obviously, as the cover report is, I'll go to the appendix and talk you through the appendix because it's visually more appealing. So if we go to page 75, this summarises the safety plan improvements, and you can see that of the 6 that were tasked, One has been completed, which is the receiving the Grenfell Phase 2, and obviously there's a report about that later on the agenda. And then the other 5 are progressing well, so an average completion of just over 70%. And obviously those will be delivered by the end of March. You'll see the top one there on the left-hand side of page 75 is the policy framework that we've just agreed some of the policies as part of. Moving into the second part of this performance report, looks at the various metrics that we monitor throughout the year. If I draw your attention to page 79, so this is incidents attended between April 24 and September 24. So this has seen a very slight 4% increase of the number of incidents compared to the same period in 2023. Primarily, this is because of increases in the number of special service calls, which in effect are more road traffic collisions where we've had wetter and windier weather, alongside an increase to the number of co-responder calls, which you may recall from the end of last year's performance report were down lower. Sorry, just Councillor, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Matt, just while we're on that, because I was going to actually have a question on this, bringing to mention page 79. Medical incidents up by 15%. I know you're not going to be able to give me this figure now, but does this go up in the winter? Only because I've noticed many residents are very vocal on social media, or there's a fire station out here with an ambulance, but the ambulance got here first. I've actually had to let some residents know it might not actually be a fire just because you've seen a fire engine. They do support medical episodes as well. And as you know, where I work, ambulance service is extremely stretched the last few weeks. So I can imagine we're supporting the ambulance service quite a lot at the moment. I just don't know if you can get your hands on any stats that show this goes up. I just think we need to shout about it a bit more from a fire service point of view. I don't think the communities are aware how much the fire service supports medical incidents. Just thought I wanted to mention that.
Yep, so I don't have a seasonal variation to date, but we will have some of that in intelligence. Certainly it is linked to the availability of crews, both our crews that are available and also whether the SCAS crews are available or not. We have done a lot of concerted effort to drive that up, so working really closely with SCAS, because our year-end report last year showed that the numbers of co-responders were falling, and we committed to exploring that and working closer with SCAS to drive it up. So certainly that is a positive outcome. The other reason on incidents is we've had a sort of a 5% decrease in fires and a 1% decrease in false alarms, which is largely down to less cooking-related alarm calls. Moving on to the next page, average critical response times. We now report, as per the authority's response policy, we report response times including call handling. So these figures have moved from the sort of high 7 minutes into sort of 10 minutes because the call handling time has been added into that overall time. So it doesn't mean that we've got slower, it just by 2.5 minutes. It's because the call handling has been added. It was always there. So that is in line with your policy. Again, the reason, so we're about 16 seconds slower from the same period, April to September last year. The reason for this is links to what I said just a second ago around the types of incidents. So the more road traffic accidents we have, those tend to be in rural parts of the county, which takes slower time to respond. So you're seeing in the incident time the fact that it's taking crews longer to get to more rural areas on harder to access roads where traffic accidents generally happen. The other thing just to highlight here is the benchmarking obviously is on the bottom, and you'll see that on the bottom of page 80 this is, and you'll see that we're at sort of 9 minutes 52 seconds to comparable incidents versus just over 10 on similar services. So we still benchmark favourably, even though we've seen a slight increase in the current year. On to the next page, page 81, on-call availability. So as I think members have already mentioned, slightly higher, so up 2.4% from the same period last year. On-call availability clearly does continue to be a challenge for the service, particularly during the day hours, we have less of an issue on nighttime hours, but during the day, certainly an issue. We have, however, seen some key improvements in certain operational groups and on certain station areas. So there is work being done with those operational teams, with managers, and also with our performance analysis team to really understand what are the factors behind some localized success stories, and are they things that are replicable across other parts of the county. However, our benchmarking is still that this is clearly a national problem. And if you look at the South East services in particular, the average availability is 48%. So we are slightly higher than benchmarkable services in the South East, although nationally the average is 65%, so we're slightly below the national average. But in some ways that may be less helpful. So there are clearly acute regional challenges with on-call. On to the next page, page 82. Unfortunately, despite the overall number of fires compared to last year, we have started to see an increase in the number of fire-related casualties and, sadly, fire fatalities. And this is where the fire is the suspected cause of death. The increase in casualties is due to an increase in incidents which seem to involve multiple casualties, whilst last year we saw many just sort of single casualty incidents. So we're seeing that sort of trend in this year slightly differently. And between April and September 2024, we've responded to 4 incidents which have resulted in a fatality where a fire was the suspected cause of death. However, these are all still awaiting coroner investigations to confirm the confirmed actual cause of death. On to page 83 and our prevention work. So this is a really positive story. This has seen a significant increase in our safe and well visits versus the same 6-month period last year. And I think really importantly to highlight is the top right of that page, which shows sort of the outcome of those interventions, where 86% of vulnerable people agree or strongly agree that they now feel safer in their home following their visit, and 77% have reported that they have made some form of behavioural change since their safe and well visit. So it's a real testament to the focus and the dedication of both our crews operationally doing post-incident visits, but also the preventative in our centralised safe and well team, the work they are doing, where clearly there is evidence around making life safer, and you can see the full circle of that good work on that page. Moving on to fire safety audits. So in the year, we have completed around 14% less fire safety audits than we had this time last year. However, it is important to note that fire safety audits are clearly only one prevention intervention, and a wide range of both formal and informal activity takes place. Equally, you can see on that page that the number of enforcements, prohibitions, and alleged fire risks that we have issued are all increased significantly. So the reduction in audits, but the increase in the prohibition and enforcement activity does suggest that we are targeting risk more effectively. So though there's less number, it's high quality, and we're seeing that through the enforcement activity that follows. Looking away from sort of operational metrics now, on page 85, staff sickness. So we're obviously very pleased to see that staff sickness continues to reduce, and it reduced at the back end of last year due to long-term sickness reductions, and we're seeing that also in the mid-year update here today. And that is notably seen in the whole-time firefighter sickness absence rates dropping. Based on national sickness data, you can see that we now compare a bit more favourably than we did previously. Equally at the bottom of that page, health and safety. So we've seen a 19% increase in health and safety events, which is not always bad, and certainly in this case a positive in that we are seeing a much smaller proportion events being accidents and near misses rather than being accidents rather than a large proportion being accidents. So our leading and lagging are positively in the right direction. The other thing just to draw down is on page 87, PDRs, and this is one the authority has discussed before in terms of staff development. So it is really positive. Again, at mid-year, we're seeing 74% of staff having recorded a PDR conversation in the first 6 months of the year, which is a 12% increase on where we were last year. And then just on continue on the theme on staff diversity on page 88. So we don't in mid-year report all of our diversity statistics. We report them annually in our annual performance report. But just things of note on page 88 around the disclosure rates. So it's obviously positively, we are seeing 91% of staff having disclosed their ethnicity, which is really positive, and 57% of staff have disclosed their sexual orientation, which is a 10% increase on this position last year. So we're really seeing the confidence of staff to provide information around their protected characteristics, which is really key for us to understand how we better support and lead the workforce. On our carbon reduction pathway journey, and picking up the point Councillor Parker-Jones raised, we are seeing our progress to net zero monitored through these reports. So we're currently tracking at about 70% reduction in our carbon footprint from the base year in 2019-20, and there's an update there on buildings and vehicles. So happy to take any questions, but those are some of the key highlights from our mid-year performance position.
Thank you, Matt. Members, any questions, any comments? David?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Critical response times. What other responses do we have? Because obviously the ambulance service has different response times according to the need. Are ours just there's a fire, get the appliance there, or do we have different criteria for call out? I mean, I suppose the cat stuck up the tree would be a lower response time necessarily, but back to you.
So yeah, the way these calls are reported in this report is it's just, so the top figure on page 80, so the critical response times that's at 10 minutes is every incident that we have attended, regardless of what that incident is. The one below that, the benchmark one, is just primary fire, so that's the definition in the green box on the bottom right. But we respond as fast as we can to all incidents rather than categorising them differently, and therefore we don't report them differently in this report.
To come back, would there be any advantage in categorising the incident so we could see how well we responded to the critical or urgent incidents as opposed to any others?
Yeah, we currently only categorise them as critical incidents and then non-critical incidents, but we don't have sort of a large grading system like other emergency services may have. And the Fire Authority response policy sets out that requirement for us to respond as quickly as we can to incidents rather than grading them down into 1, 2 and 3 or other things.
Fran.
Thank you. Yes, on page 80 you talk about longer time to get to rural roads. You talk about the rural aspect of it quite a lot. Living in the New Forest, it's quite of interest to me. But haven't accidents in Hampshire always been on rural roads? And I just wondered why that is used as not an excuse, but as a reason for slower times.
Clearly, there's many parameters that go into response times, but particularly with rural, it does link, an element of it links to on-call availability. So most rural areas are served largely by on-call. So you can see where the average on-call availability is sat at, wherever it is, that has an impact, particularly during the daytime, where you may find like a whole-time crew from a station, probably in a more urban area, will need to travel further to pick up an area. Equally with rural, of course, we've always had the rural areas, but our breadth of the range of different incidents we are attending to is moving, and the more it moves into things like road traffic accidents, for example, the more we'll continue to need to respond to rural areas. So it tends to be rural roads are more dangerous and people have more accidents on them, and therefore we have exactly. There's more traffic, the roads are different, and it's taken longer to respond to them.
Yeah. Lou.
Hi, it's very interesting about the carbon reduction, but you highlighted that there's been an increase due to the changing climate. So in terms of the call out, a lot of our increased responses are due to extreme weather events such as the flooding and the high winds. Is the service doing a lot of mapping about the implications of the changing climate and the implications that will have for the types of service we will need to start providing as we go forward with these 1 in 100 events happening now virtually every other year? Thank you.
Yes, so the short answer to that is yes. So we do, and we've just done a large piece of work on our what's called our Community Risk Management Plan, but our CRMP for short, which has mapped out the risk and the future risk across the communities of Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. Our intention is that will be renewed every year, so every 12 months. We will reassess the risk environment, which will include the impact of the climate and environmental changes and things like that. So as increase in, for example, flooding may become more prevalent, we need to know where those areas are and how we respond accordingly and provide the right kit and equipment to crews. So yeah, it'll be an annual cycle to monitor the external risk of communities, which will include climate.
Any more? No? Okay, thank you. Matt, thank you. I can draw your attention to the recommendation on page 66, which is that the 24-25 mid-year performance update report be noted by the full authority. Noted? Agreed. Noted. Can I, Adam, can I ask you, can we send that mid-year update to all of Hampshire County Councillors, please? I like Hampshire to know how good their fire service is, and we don't do enough of it. And if you could send also a copy to Sally, who can send it to her Southampton colleagues, and to George, so they can send it on. With the Oh, and to the sorry, and to the Isle of Wight. Sorry, Karen. That's all right. No, we haven't forgotten you. Yeah.
I was just going to say, I do already send that to as soon as I do sometimes ask Matt just to send me over the link, and I do share that with not just my Labour group, with all the city councillors, because like you, I like to shout about what a good job we're doing.
Well, we shout about it. We don't shout about it enough. With my compliments and the compliments of the authority. Thank you. Right, moving on then to the next paper, which is 11. Grenfell Tower Assurance and Progress Report, which is John Amos.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon, members. So I'm presenting this on behalf of our Director of Operations, Rob Cole, who's on leave. So the report today is to provide the authority with assurance on the progress of the recommendations of the Phase 1 report, to provide information on our plan to review and implement the recommendations from Phase 2 of the report, and to provide information on the work of our protection teams as a result of both Phase 1 and Phase 2 recommendations. So the Phase 1 report was published on the 30th of October 2019 with 46 recommendations, of which 34 have been attributed to the fire sector. Appendix A within your report details the completion of these actions for Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Service. So we've completed those actions for Phase 1. Phase 2 report was published on the 4th of September 2024. And the Phase 2 report identifies the many failings of a wide range of institutions and individuals over many years that brought about the Grenfell Tower tragedy. So there are a total of 58 recommendations from the Phase 2 report. And what we've done is we've identified which directly link to us, and we separated them into 3 key areas. And those 3 key areas are areas which we will monitor for progress. So this is recommendations which are the responsibility of another organisation. However, there could be an indirect impact on us. The second one is for awareness only, and this recommendation is the responsibility of another organisation that may have an indirect impact on us as a service. And then the third one is action. So this recommendation has a direct impact on the service, and specific action is being taken to address these requirements. So there are actually 14 of the Grenfell recommendations for action, which we have risk assessed and prioritised and allocated to our subject matter leads. And these recommendations will be monitored through our operational learning and assurance group. It's also about our protection teams continuing to work with our identified stakeholders and influencing where we can. So in conclusion, the report summarises the important work the service is carrying out as a result of the Phase 1 and the Phase 2 inquiry and the protection work our teams are carrying out to reassure our communities, which our colleagues spoke about earlier today. So prioritising progress in the recommendations, and obviously we will provide further reports to you as a fire authority as the need arises. So that's the conclusion of the report, Mr. Chairman. There are some recommendations on page 93 if you would like to note them.
John, thank you. Thank you. The Deputy Chief Fire Officer would like to say something.
Thank you. So I just really wanted to draw some threads together to help members in that clearly this is a very important piece of work to provide you with that assurance, to let you know what we're doing for those that live in higher rise buildings, tall buildings, those communities, and also to take all of the learning from those public inquiries. But really, this very much will stay with the authority, with the service for years to come. You know, we're committed to it for the long term, and it very much ties in both with some of your policies you've already approved, and your position statements and your ambitions as a fire authority, but also if you think about the kind of wider context from the government around the ambition for more housing building, you can see how all of this learning, yes, it looks back at a very tragic event several years ago, but really this rightly is to stay with us and for us to consider not just how we as a fire and rescue service will protect those from the risk of fire within those kinds of buildings, but also working with local authorities, local housing associations, both on the remediation side of things and on also the kind of future building, planning, consultation, etc.
Thank you, Janta. Members, any questions, any comments? No. Okay. If I can draw you to the recommendations on page 93. That the completed progress the services has made in meeting the Grenfell Tower Inquiry Phase 1 report recommendations be noted by the full authority, that the approach and progress the service is making towards meeting the Grenfell Tower Inquiry Phase 2 recommendations be noted by the full authority, and over the page, that the proactive engagement work that the service protection teams are progressing as a result, both Grenfell Tower Inquiry reports with key stakeholders be noted by the full authority. Noted? Thank you. Yeah.
Before we move on to the next item, going back to 3S Fire on proportionalities.
Oh, yes?
Karen has agreed that she would take on that position on 3S Fire.
Karen? Although Karen is a deputy.
As I say, we need to
Don't need- New deputy.
I don't think I can
Yeah,
yet.
yes.
Well, it does say here that there are 2 Conservatives, which there are, and there are 3 of your group.
Yes.
It doesn't say who the deputy should come from, Paul.
One of each group, I think, one of each political group.
Okay, so
if we move Karen up to the full member, and then appoint Lou as the deputy.
fine by me. Here we are. I shot the sheriff. Yeah, okay. Right. Lou. Good. Have we got that?
Yeah, are you okay to go through the recommendations for that report, just to kind of tidy it up?
What, who's who in the zoo?
No, just the recommendations that include the proportionality overall membership and the allowances. Yeah, it's just the agreed recommendations.
Page one of the report.
Page 1 of the report. Give me a page, quickly.
One.
That's easy.
It's on the separate.
It's on the separate.
Oh, no, I haven't got that. I haven't got that one. No, that's
Oh, no,
that's this afternoon.
Oh, sorry.
quick. Get page one up. There we go. The recommendation being, I've lost all of this paper, that for the purposes of Part 1 of the Local Government and Housing Act 1989, the authority agrees that the allocation of seats on the Audit and Governance Committee, 3S Fire, Stakeholders Committee and Appointments Committee of the authority as set out in Appendix 2 of the report. Do we need to read out what that is? Have we agreed?
Agreed.
That the authority reconfirm the members of the Audit and Governance Committee, 3S Fire Stakeholders Committee, and the Appointment Committee and their respective chairman and vice chairman following the agreed allocation of seats at paragraph 4. Agreed? That the authority notes the updated members' allowance scheme as set out in Appendix 3.
Agreed.
That's it.
That's it.
All right. I'll tell you the names later. Right, thank you, John. Thank you very much. Item 11, no, item 12, which is property matters on page 137 of your paperwork. Back to you, Matt, please.
Thank you, Chairman. So this is a standard report, comes periodically to the authority, and it just summarises property-related transactions which have taken place by officers under delegated authority. So in paragraph 3, there's a reminder of what that delegated authority is. So any property transactions which fall outside of the paragraph 3 definition are approved under the scheme of delegation and are included within this report for noting by members. And you'll see the various things that have happened over the last period in paragraph 6. Happy to take any questions.
Members, questions? Roger?
Mr. Chairman, not a question. It's just I noticed that Karen has left the room. In last night's meeting, we did discuss, because she's involved with the Crime and Police Commissioner, and she's Vice Chairman or Chairman, I'm not sure of the committee, as whether she has a non-pecuniary interest and it should be declared at this point. So as she's left the room... yeah, I know she left the room, but that might not necessarily be recorded in the minutes. And my advice to her last evening was to talk to Paul.
That's what we do. What does legal say?
Yeah, I think Karen is chair of the Police and Crime panel, I think,
yes.
now. So I don't think that creates a sort of inherent conflict with a role on fire, but something that needs to be considered on an item-by-item basis. So and I think as the report is just for noting, I think it probably isn't a prejudicial interest in this item, albeit it's worth, I think, capturing that she does have that.
And that is your decision?
Private interest, yeah.
Good. Sorted.
Thank you.
She's not here anyway.
Well, yeah, quite. Right. We've sorted it. Yeah, no, good point. Well, there's a lot of Office of Police Crime Commissioner written in there. Good point. Anything else, ladies and gentlemen? If I can refer you then to the recommendation on page 137, that the item set out in this report be noted by the full authority. Noted. Good. Now we move to resolve that the public be excluded from the meeting during the following business, as it is likely, in view of the nature of the business to be transacted or the proceedings, that if members of the public were present during these items, there will be disclosed to them and exempt information with it, etc., etc. Who's gone?
Sally's colleague, Councillor Fred.
Oh, yeah.
Gone.
Oh,
Yeah.